Hi, I'm Warren Sprouse. You're on the Bible Forum. We're here every Sunday night for at least 2 hours. We talk about life, talk about politics, we talk about the Bible, we talk about all sorts of things. This section is political. And the question is, what's going on? Democrats say they're angry. They're angry about the precedent and the propriety of a hurry-up nomination process. They invoke Ginsburg's supposed dying wish that she not be replaced until a new president is installed. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, threatened that, quote, nothing is off the table for next year, end of quote, if Senate Republicans move the process forward. You do realize that the Republican senators don't need even one Democrat to move this forward. And Massachusetts Representative Joe Kennedy III tweeted his contempt for the Supreme Court, saying, if he holds a vote in 2020, we pack the court in 2021. It's that simple. I don't know how they're going to do that unless they go in and feed 3 or 4 of these guys some poison. They're not ready to go. I mean, one of the Democrats is ready. One of the Republicans is ready. But I expect that if Trump gets reelected, he'll go next year or in the next couple of years. But this is the case of Coup Karma. If the left can unilaterally impeach and try to remove a president during an election year, a Supreme Court justice can certainly be appointed during an election year. And the Democrats can hardly stand on principle regarding election year nominations when they were more than willing to engage in a partisan election year impeachment fiasco, all based on a contrived pretext that had no chance of prevailing. The impeachment followed other failed attempts to sabotage this president, accusing him of illicit spying, the insurance policy, seeking to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove him from office, the Mueller witch hunt investigation, efforts that harassed him despite almost everyone in D.C. knowing there was never any evidence of Russian collusion. After the Mueller fiasco flamed out, Democrats weaponized the whistleblower process to create a fake scandal out of a harmless July 25th conversation between President Trump and President Zelensky of Ukraine. This became the basis for what George Washington University law professor Jonathan Turley, a liberal, called the shortest proceeding with the thinnest evidentiary record and the narrowest grounds ever used to impeach a president. Keep in mind the impeachment moved out of the House based on an unprecedented party line vote. In the House, the Democrats hold the majority. Byron York called it an election year gambit, using the impeachment as the most audacious opposition research maneuver of all time. Berkeley law professor John Yoo cautioned that the Founding Fathers would have rejected the idea of an election year impeachment because they expected that the American people would hold a president accountable for any abuses of power at the ballot box. The left has hired 600 lawyers for the Biden campaign and intends the Supreme Court to be an active participant in the 2020 election, making stakes going into November frankly too high to have a Supreme Court not at full strength. Unique to this election are the mail-in ballots. Not that mail-in ballots are unique, but that the Democrats have pushed for a mail-in election that virtually guarantees fraud, chaos, and subsequent urgent litigation. They have instructed Democrat nominee Joe Biden not to concede under any circumstances. They have threatened violence if they do not win. The reality? A confirmation vote by October 30 is completely doable, talking about the Supreme Court, especially since a cabal of corrupt politicians tried to ram through an election year impeachment and failed. Again, coup karma. It is absurd to suggest a president whose party controls the Senate should jointly decline to fill a vacant Supreme Court seat. Ever. Tyler Durden wrote in ZeroHedge.com that at a time when Democrats are insisting President Trump demeaned the military with an offhand remark about how he liked live soldiers versus the dead kind, Democrats apparently forgot that nothing recorded is ever really gone. Something no one either heard or is willing to say they did. Apparently now a recording has been found, video and all. But it's a recording of then Vice President Biden deriding his military audience when they didn't clap for something he said. According to the transcript, Joe Biden says, "I have incredibly good judgment. 1, I married Jill. And 2, I appointed Johnson to the academy. I just want you to know that." Apparently Johnson was their commanding officer. When nobody reacted, Biden came back saying, "Clap for that, you stupid blankety blanks." And then he called the soldiers a dull bunch, adding that it must be slow here, man. There's video. The video posted in 2017 is from an appearance in front of the 380th Air Expeditionary Wing, March 7, 2016, and comes weeks after President Trump was accused of calling troops losers and suckers. That account has been refuted by at least 21 sources. But it doesn't stop Biden from turning it into a campaign advertisement. Now, you do know character counts, right? That's why President Trump's reputation drags him down in the minds and hearts of so many people. And while he has done some really spectacular, important things as president, he continues to pat himself on the back, to praise his accomplishments and call his opponents names. Doesn't endear him to a lot of people. Some of us wonder how we're going to pay for all the special expenditures he's authorized. And that even before Corona. But we look at the alternatives and we find comfort in what we have. Do you know how the Biden plan would impact your life? ProphecyNewsWatch.com ran an article. It says Biden's campaign website prominently features the Biden plan to advance LGBTQ plus equality in America and around the world. It touts his support for the Equality Act, a piece of legislation that would transform the United States. The passage of the Equality Act would set the pro-life and pro-family movement back decades in one fell swoop. Biden stated that the passage of the Equality Act would be a top legislative priority of his, and also promised to ensure that adoption agencies could not refuse to place children with same-sex couples. This presumably includes religious adoption agencies and foster care agencies. He has also promised to enshrine in federal law recognition of gender identity and appoint radical pro-LGBT judges to America's courts. Non-binary people also get several prominent mentions. And then there's this section of the Biden plan which essentially advocates for the elimination of religious liberty. Biden wants to allow an additional X in addition to the M or F for male and female on government identification to accommodate those with different gender identities. He wants a total nationwide ban on conversion therapy via the Therapeutic Fraud Prevention Act of 2019, which, according to the congressional website, is designed to do just that. The U.S. Department of Justice has identified the following 3 jurisdictions that have permitted violence and destruction of property to persist and have refused to undertake reasonable measures to counteract criminal activities. This according to Katie Pavlich in townhall.com. She lists New York City, Portland, Oregon, and Seattle, Washington. 3 jurisdictions that permit violence and destruction of property, that allow it to continue to persist, and have taken no steps, no measures to stop it. Do you want to live there? The demonstrations, the riots that we're seeing of late are clearly being orchestrated, Doug Casey says in his internationalman.com article. What was once a right-wing conspiracy theory has become common knowledge. What happens? A ruling is established by any government authority, and immediately trucks show up with pallets of bricks or bushels of signage, all conveniently pointed at whatever is the current threat. Now, culture, by definition, is composed of the customs, traditions, and beliefs of a group of people. It's a way of seeing the world and interpreting reality. It determines what's right and wrong, good and evil. Culture is what ties people together or keeps them apart. It's a composite of religion, politics, economics, philosophy, and language. But the composite is more important than any of its components. And it is the culture that ties groups and countries together. When a culture splits, like what we are watching now, a country cannot, and more importantly, Casey adds, should not stay together. It's poisonous to keep different cultures together in the same political unit. Politics is all about deciding who decides who gets what and how and when and why, and who's going to pay for it. It can be a fairly cordial transaction if everybody shares the same culture, but what if they don't? Then the standard formula becomes a disaster. In our country, politics has become a contest of who gets to impose their will on the rest of the country. When that's the case, a country is best off dividing, Casey suggests. It shouldn't be held together artificially or by force, but voluntarily. Freedom of association is necessary for a civil society. People generally prefer to associate with those with whom they share a culture. Birds of a feather do, in fact, flock together. In Seattle, the city council's budget proposal was vetoed by the mayor, pressured to reduce the police budget. Council member Kshama Sawant said Tuesday's vote was the result of, quote, ferocious, end of quote, pressure from the Black Lives Matter movement. The new spending plan will cut the police department staff by roughly 100 officers, eliminate the navigation team that serves as an outreach to the homeless, and trim the SPD's command staff salaries. It will also borrow $14 million to fund community-based public safety programs and use $3 million of emergency reserves to fund a community-led public safety research project. The amended budget will strip the department of roughly $3 million, a less than 1% defunding of the department's budget. Council members described the cuts as a down payment on future changes to the department. The Downtown Seattle Association was disappointed by Tuesday's vote and said it won't result in real police reform. This according to the Seattle Times. And then there's our old friend Dick Morris. You haven't heard much from Dick Morris anymore. Dick Morris is still doing his daily 10, 15-minute videos. He's doing them from home. He is looking like he's getting older. He's putting on weight. It makes me wonder if he's not got a physical problem of some sort or other. But he still has a lot of important things to say. Dick Morris was almost single-handedly responsible for Bill Clinton's second term. If Clinton had not listened to Morris's political wisdom, he would have crashed and burned before anybody could have saved him. Morris believes that if Biden were to be able to claim victory only on the strength of dubious mailed-in ballots, a contested election would doubtless require a Supreme Court decision. He also believes that if Trump does prevail, it will be likely that any margin of victory would be overwhelmed in key swing states by a torrent of mailed-in votes. These ballots would be subject to state rules that in many cases do not require, and in some cases prohibit, signature and identity verification. Were the Biden votes that might make the difference cast by people whose identity and eligibility to vote has been established, they would be counted, and if cast in sufficient numbers, prevail. But that's not how it will happen. Widespread Democrat ballot harvesting coupled with the mass mailing of unrequested blank ballots is likely to yield a fraudulent crop of illegal votes, with any photo ID requirement bypassed by the postal system. The process of sifting through them is a recipe for guerrilla partisan warfare. 5 of the key swing states, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota, have Democrat governors in control of the counting. Even though each of these states has a Republican majority legislator, except for Minnesota, where the power is divided, there's no governor to call them into special session to act. So in these blue states, the power of counting votes will devolve to Democrat election officials. Politicians factor all of these things in. It's complex. I get a headache. Maybe you do too. But it's going to be interesting to see how it all works out. When we come back, we'll take a look at the international news. Stay tuned.